Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Isabella Nicosia, representing ISO Stakeholder Affairs, and I'll be facilitating the web conference for today. Thank you all for joining us to discuss the competitive solicitation process for the Los Angeles Basin Black Start Service Request for Proposal. I'm also joined on the line today by our other presenter, Scott Bond from Grid Assets, and we also have some other subject matter experts on the line as well. We will be taking questions throughout the call today, and we encourage you to submit them through the WebEx chat feature, which is located down on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. And then if time permits, we'll also be taking verbal questions and comments. But since today's call is an hour, we may enforce time limits just so we can hear from all stakeholders and address all questions. And also just please refrain from repeating or reiterating what has already been asked just so we can manage the time efficiently. This call is being recorded. The recording is for informational and convenience purposes only, and any related transcriptions should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. These calls are structured to stimulate an honest dialogue and engage different perspectives with the expectation that stakeholders have reviewed the material. And while we always encourage comments and questions, just a reminder to please keep them friendly and respectful. So to, again, to enter a chat in the WebEx feature, it's down on the bottom right-hand side of your screen, and then if you have a verbal question, you can enter the verbal queue by pressing #2. So with that, I will hand it over to Scott, and we'll get started.
Great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Scott Bond. I'm going to be running through the deck here today. The ISO, as a balancing authority, has a responsibility under NERC EOP 5-3 for reviewing participating transmission owner restoration plans. These plans include a review of black start resources within each PTO area. These resources are critical to system reliability in the low probability event of a widespread system outage. Due to the changing resource mix and pending generation retirements, the ISO is seeking to augment the current restoration scheme in the LA Basin area by adding supplemental black start resources. So today we'll be talking about the topics on the screen. I'll just go through the slide deck, and as Isabella said, please, if you have any questions, just put them in the chat. So we'll be talking about cost allocation, the area of consideration, selection factors and evaluation criteria, black start resource requirements, the facility information that we are requiring, individual unit data, the methodology we will take to analyze the proposals you receive, and the compliance criteria we are that you're required as a black start resource. Next slide, please. Procurement of and cost allocation for black start capability has evolved in the Cal ISO balancing authority area. Traditionally, the ISO secured black start from utility-owned generation with a $0 reservation fee, and utility retail bundled customers would pay the costs. The ISO made changes in 2017 and revised cost allocation rules to facilitate black start agreements with generators that involve a new capital investment and operating costs, not with a $0 reservation fee. The generation owner files an agreement with the FERC reflecting these costs of service rates. Costs are designated as reliability services costs under the ISO tariff and allocated to the PTO whose area the generator is located. These costs are recovered by that PTO pursuant to their reliability services tariff. Next slide, please. So this is a geographic area, and so this drawing and graphic is taken from the ISO 2021 LCR report. And so what it does is it delineates the area where we're looking to augment black start resources. So what are listed there are the substations that ring the area. The LA Basin is what we're talking about. It consists of the eastern LA Basin, the El Nido sub-area, and the western LA Basin. So this area does not include, that we're looking for solicitation, does not include the San Diego sub-area or the San Diego Imperial Valley area. Next slide, please. The goal of this solicitation is to create, well, we want proposals from Black Start Resources to create multiple stable 230 kV islands in the LA Basin for faster system restoration. a point should be made that even though the substations that we've listed here as the border, if you are outside the LA Basin, we would encourage those generators still to bid. Many generators still have the technical capability to establish an island in the LA Basin area and could serve as black start resources. They will be evaluated just like all the other resources on the criteria we're going to go over in the next few slides. Next slide, please. So the selection factors criteria we'll be looking at will be the calculated time to energize a 220 bus in the LA Basin. So you saw the limit of the LA Basin. We're just looking to heat up a hot bus there, and then we're going to calculate the switching steps to a first potential target unit so that we could set up an island. So that is two of the criteria. Then we're going to look at some of the other technical abilities to meet restoration requirements. Obviously, are going to be the facility's real and reactive power capabilities, the protective relay and the ability of it to be used in a situation where it's an island mode, the ramping and loading capabilities of the facility that is also putting a proposal out. Other selection factors include restoration flexibility, and this has to do with how many different possible paths or ways could we get to a resource or number of lines out of a substation. Those are some of the examples of restoration flexibility. Locational diversity would just spell to, if we receive proposals from multiple generators in the same area, we wouldn't want to award to two black start generators right next to each other. So we are looking for generators that are not necessarily two black start generators right next to each other, so that will be considered in the proposals we receive. The in-service date and schedule, the costs, and probability of completing the contract. So that simply states if you put the capital in and we build this black start resource, 5-10-year contract is what we're looking for. And so the probability that that resource will be around for the whole term of that area. And that, next slide, please. This is the definition of a black start resource. It must be able to satisfy, it must be a generating unit and its associated set of equipment which has the ability to be started without the support from the system or designed to remain energized without a connection to the remainder of the system, with the ability to energize the bus, meet the transmission operator's restoration plan needs for real and reactive power capability, frequency and voltage control, and that has been included in the transmission operator's restoration plan. Next slide. In other words, the facility must be able to supply its own startup power, serve its own plant load, and it must be able to modify its protective relay settings to meet the requirements during a black start event. The unit must be able to operate for 48 hours continuously in this isochronous mode, and it must be able to energize a dead transmission bus within 3 hours. Next slide, please. The information that we've already posted, including the spec, asks, and the commercial worksheet will ask for this type of information. We're asking for the interconnection voltage and the location of the facility, the type of fuel that the facility is using, the operational characteristics and limitations that could be a generator D-curve, many other things, the single line for the facility under consideration, a general timeline or general steps that we required for black starting and energizing a high voltage bus, and then the estimated dead bus restoration time. So how long would it take for this facility to get started up and energize that bus? And finally, historical facilities, we'd like facility reliability information. Next slide, please. Individual unit characteristics besides facility characteristics include impedances and tap settings for generators and transformers, tie line impedance, I already noted, generator impedance. We will also need, because this information will be used to run restoration simulations, so we will need the GE PSLF models for the steady state and dynamic for the facility. Next slide, please. All that information will be used, and we will use it in a way to do the technical evaluation, which first we will, after it has been received, we will validate all the submitted data. That's just making sure we've got for everything we need to completely evaluate the proposal. We'll map that resource and run preliminary steady state analysis. Then we will, using the single line and the system diagrams we have, determine the switching requirement steps needed to energize the 220 kV bus and the nearest potential target unit. We'll take an analysis of all the requirements that we've provided during these steps, megawatts and megavar capabilities, fault current capability, frequency regulation, the ability to energize and pick up cranking paths, voltage regulation, and any operational deadbands that the facility might have. As I've already mentioned, we will consider restoration flexibility and locational diversity with respect to other proposed black start generators. Next slide, please. As far as the commercial and economic analysis, these proposals will be based on a cost of service model. We'll look at capital costs and operating costs, and then the schedule for implementation and commencement of black start service date. And as already mentioned, the likelihood of completing a 5 to 10 year contract. Next slide, please. Black start service requires that a black start generator will comply with the requirements of EOP-00503, SIP 003 through 09, and the California ISO's black start resource testing requirements, OP 5630. Next slide, please. The next steps for this proposal process are stated above. Today, we're opening the window for this proposal. They are due in 60 business days, August 11th. Then we will take 10 business days to validate the proposals, make sure we have the information. If we issue any request for clarification or additional information, we would expect to see those within 10 business days. We will then evaluate the proposals, run the simulations, and then that'll take about 75 business days. Then we'll notify applicants and post the final report. During the open window process, if you have any questions, please submit them to the Black Start Competitive Solicitation mailbox. On a weekly basis, we will provide a Q&A log with the question that has been asked and an answer from the ISO. And with that, I am concluding my presentation. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Scott. So as a reminder, if you have a question, go ahead and send it in the chat message. You can address it to all panelists. And please state your organization or affiliation, and I'll read your message out to Scott. We'll give it a second here, see if any messages come in. I'm not seeing any in the chat. So, Ethan, do we have any questions on the phone line?
At this time, we do not.
Okay. If there are no questions, I think that concludes. Scott, is there anything else you wanted to add?
I would just add that if you do have any questions, please go ahead and submit them to the Black Start Competitive Solicitation mailbox, and we will do our best to answer them as quickly as we can so that you can have the information necessary to provide a complete proposal.
Okay. I'll check one more time to see if we have any questions in the queue before we wrap up.
At this time, there are still no hands raised in the queue.
Okay. Then that concludes today's stakeholder call. Thank you all for your participation, and have a great rest of your day.